Ahmad, good afternoon. I think you're on mute.
Afternoon, Andy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, David, are we good to start, or what's the protocol?
I just realized that my mic was on mute. I was saying good afternoon, MD. Good afternoon, Ahmad. Ojumwa, James.
Hey, Anita.
Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I hope we haven't lost our host. I can't seem to find him.
Oh yeah, it looks like his icon has disappeared.
Yeah, I think he's probably trying to log back on. Okay, I think we have him back on now.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I think we are all here.
Yes, David.
Anita, are you there? I think Anita is coming on shortly so that we can pick off.
She was here a moment ago. Maybe we just.
I think she's coming on now. Yes. Okay, I think we can start. Okay. Anita, here we are. Good morning. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone watching us right now, depending on what part of the world you're watching from. You're welcome to the REA Power Chat. I mean, this is the first Maiden Edition of the Power Chat, and this is one of the strategic reactions to the COVID-19 pandemic. But beyond that, this would be a channel, a platform where critical stakeholders, thought leaders and professionals like yourself would come on periodically to share your thoughts and share solution-driven ideas on the acceleration of the access in energy sector. So I welcome you all. Before we kick off, let's go through a few house rules, especially for people watching us across all platforms. So permit me to just share a few house rules. This webinar is being recorded. As a matter of fact, it's a multicast, so you could easily tell people to join us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We made it so just in case people can't join in via Zoom. It makes it easy for participants to join in across all platforms, all of our REA platforms. And there will be a 20 minutes Q&A session after this conversation is over. You could easily send in your questions using the Q&A function. You could see it on your user interface as an attendee. And then you can use the chat function in case you have any technical issue. We have technical people on standby to also help out with that. So we can kick off now. I welcome you all once again to the REA Power Chat. We're going to be having a few discussions around some critical issues that involves rural electrification and the acceleration of energy, and especially in the rural, unserved and underserved areas. So just as a bit of introduction, we have the MDC of REA, Ahmad Salihijo Ahmad, the current MDC of REA joining us today. And we have Honorable Ahmad Zakari, the Special Advisor on Infrastructure to the President. We also have my dear friend James Sherwood from the Rocky Mountain Institute. Hello, James. We have here Anita Otubu. Anita Otubu is the head PMU for the Rural Electrification Project, the World Bank and AFDB funded Nigerian Electrification Project. And then Ujuma Ojenini. Ujuma, I see you all the time on Instagram. Thanks for thanks for joining us today. I see a lot of your work. A few weeks ago, I actually read an article you put out, which is quite interesting. I'm going to touch on that shortly. Thanks for joining us. Ujuma is from the office of the Lagos State, working with the Lagos State Commissioner for Energy and Mineral Resources. Thanks for joining us, Ujuma. So, let's kick off. I would like to do a little pause test, if you permit me. I would like to know how you've been coping, especially how you've been managing our work-life balance during this pandemic. MD, if you can start with that, I'll be delighted.
Thank you very much, David. Well, I guess it was a bit of a challenge. Really at the start of the pandemic, where this was obviously something probably none of us on this call has experienced before. We had to sit at home and get used to doing things done, getting things done in different ways. But however, I think by the time we started living more or less with it, you find that you have to adjust to what they now call the new norm. Making sure that you're protecting yourselves, always washing your hands and wearing your face mask, etc., and then maintaining social distancing. Yes. But I think one of the critical things is that it shows us as well that in situations like this, even as before, when you probably have to get on a flight and go to Lagos, stay in a hotel, spend a few nights, come back just for one meeting, you could actually do it from the comfort of either your house or your office via some of the platforms that have been provided. So it's been interesting, but we hope it's going to come to an end very, very soon.
Yes, hopefully, yes. Ahmad, can you hear your take on this? A little pause from you. How have you been managing your work?
I think, and MD will attest to this, the work has been actually more intense, given just the challenges that the country is going through. I think the first week when Villa was shut down, I think that was the week I worked the most since I joined government. On the negative side, and there is mostly negative from this pandemic with the health issues and economic issues. We've had to really adjust our thinking in the country and work towards adjusting, just like everyone else in the globe. But I do think one thing that it has forced us to do is really focus on priorities. And that's important. You'll see some of the big economic decisions that we've been pushing off as a country. We've had to drive them now. And I think, quite frankly, lack of travel has actually been more efficient for government. You don't know how disruptive traveling is when people are jumping from one seminar or conference to another. It will be very difficult in some weeks to find the full complement of leadership in location. Even governors that used to come to Abuja every month for NEC, we do it on the web now. So I think there's something to be said for, hard decisions and more efficiency, but obviously a lot of difficulty and many of the things that MD said regarding protecting ourselves and ensuring the health outcomes are managed for the country.
Yes, totally. And of course, there's a reduction in carbon emission now, right? And we haven't been traveling much. I think that also counts in a lot of ways. Anita, we've had a series of meetings and webinars and fun Monday meetings and a lot of other meetings that we keep having. And it's great that we're having a lot done, even during this pandemic. Is a good thing because the business of energy access is not something that we could put a hold to. And I'm happy that we've been managing well. So let's hear from you. How have you been managing this?
So a bit like what Ahmad had said, I feel that we've been a lot more productive. Our discussions have been more focused on work. So when you're having your Zoom meetings, unlike when you're in the office and someone may come into your office and just have some general chit-chat, you learn to really manage your time properly. Lots of back-to-back meetings, very focused meetings. So from the positive perspective, I think it's been okay. But I do also understand the challenges faced by the participants under the Rural Electrification project, how many good developers, solar home system providers, etc. Because obviously, it's impacted largely on their own productivity in terms of being able to make these connections and sell their solar home systems. So that, I believe, has been, I guess, a challenging aspect as an impact, essentially, of the COVID-19 on the power space. But from an office perspective, from a net perspective, as you just mentioned, David, we've been having lots and lots of meetings, very productive meetings. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. John, how is Lagos today, and how have you been managing the life work balance during the pandemic?
So, life has been good. Life has been interesting. I think for me and my work, it's really been about focusing, and specifically focusing in a very distracted world where there's a lot of news around different things. So whether it's the pandemic, whether it's elections, whether it's the economy, so many distractions, but really being able to focus. And for me, it's been in two areas. So at work, it's been looking at what is the most essential thing that is required to provide access to energy to the low-income households and individuals, and specifically the health centers or the health facilities. So then this would involve looking at what the most practical solution is for each of those. Maybe for primary health centers, do they need small renewable solutions just to manage? But I think another thing is also around safely deploying those solutions. So we had engagements with the stakeholders in the sector to see how we can support each other. Some of them needed exemptions, some of them just needed some support, and they also offered support to the government. So it's been very good. It's been really focused. And then going over to family and team, it's been around being empathetic, so show empathy, checking with the team, with the family, understanding that people are homeschooling at this time, and that comes with its own challenges. But then agreeing upfront what expectations are, so whether it's at home or at work, and then holding ourselves accountable to those. So really, I think for me,
I think Ujima is having a little bit of internet problems.
So just to add that that's probably one of the issues being faced as people to having to deal with the technical issues with the various
Remember, yeah, remember the meeting we tried to have yesterday, Anita, where we spent an hour just trying to hear ourselves. But
so James, let's go over to you. Congratulations on the Mokoleki project. I would love to hear how you pulled that off in the midst of a pandemic, and how you were able to coordinate your team members and work with the multiple stakeholders who were part of this project. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I think if where everyone has said, I would agree with. There's been a lot of adaptation and a lot of learning, but also a lot of efficiencies that we've gained as a result of not traveling. So we've been able to, I think, work with the partners over the course and, really get everybody more comfortable with taking Zoom meetings and phone calls. And, for us, with some of our team being in Nigeria and some of our team being in Europe and some being in the US, we're well adapted to working remotely in many ways. So in some ways, it was easy for us to hit the ground running on this because it's something that we've had to do in normal times as well. But I do think one of the big things in Uju, I like your point about empathy being important. That's been something that we've really had to do within our team and with our partners, and just recognizing that sometimes people are going to have family situations crop up and they're not going to be able to take a meeting and need to be flexible around that. So I would add flexibility to major things that we've done to try to, make sure that we're both getting the work done, but also respecting people's personal lives as well. Well, I'll be happy to say more about the local project as we get into this.
Yeah, totally. We really love to hear that. So let's move quickly into the business of the day. MD will be kicking off with you today. Just as a quick follow-up to how we've all been surviving and working and putting in work and coordinating team members during the pandemic. I would love you to tell us what has been the agency's response, the response of the Rural Electrification Agency to the pandemic, especially as it relates to healthcare and clean energy for healthcare delivery.
Thank you very much for that, David. And I think before we even get to some of the technical things that we tried to do, I think what was most important initially is to ensure that all our colleagues are safe. So we all duly obliged to the federal government's directive of obviously staying at home and ensured that before we actually returned to office, we put all the necessary safety protocols in place just to keep members of the REA very, very safe. And very, very quickly as well, we tried to look at what are the one or two things that we can do following on from the President's initial speech on COVID. And also the Honorable Minister of Power mentioning that government agencies should think of ways to help out in the pandemic. So working with the NCDC, we identified 4 hospitals that were elected as either isolation or treatment centers in Abuja, and also in Lagos and in Ogun State. And we mobilized and deployed some mini-grid systems for them. The one in Abuja was about 53 kilowatt peak, while the one in Lagos was about 20 kilowatt peak, and 2 10 kilowatt peak mini-grids in Ogun State. So the idea behind it is, just as some of the earlier speakers mentioned, serving the frontline workers, just to ensure that we are able to power very, very critical loads, including fridges, ventilators, and other equipment that usually wouldn't have clean, reliable, safe power for 24 hours. So I think for us that really set the tone, just to show that with some resources, as a government agency, we were able to come and help in that particular manner. And of course, moving forward, that project also showed that it's possible to power these healthcare facilities, especially the critical ones that have been very, very relevant to the COVID-19. I think we also got a lot of our partners, the World Bank, especially also thinking and coming up with some ideas on how we can get more of this kind of programs, which I think by the time we continue the discussions, we can have a few more details on that. So I think that was what we did to just set the tone.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. Just as a follow-up to that, Honorable Ahmad, recently His Excellency, the President of Nigeria, Muhammad Buhari, approved the composition of the Power Sector Reform Coordination Working Group, and we are aware that you're the Secretary of this very critical group. Could you share your thoughts, give light on the objectives and expected impact of this working group?
Yeah, I think everyone that's read the 2005 Electricity Power Sector Reform Act that actually, set out the creation of the REA, would see that the structure of the industry is quite diverse. It set out the requirements for privatization. It introduced BPE and the National Council on Privatization into the space of the power sector, and it spawned the creation of REA, MEMCO, and it clearly even looked right, and then it clearly set out the responsibilities of the ministry and the minister as being the head of policy direction for the government in the power sector. Now, what that did really was it introduced a multitude of players, right? And then when you even have a privatized sector, you have the private sector now with the GENCOs and the DISCOs alongside TCN that make up the whole value chain. What this created was a recipe for coordination challenges, right? Furthermore, if you look at the Niger Delta Power Holding Company that was set up, and due to the states going to court, it becoming a federation asset rather than a federal government asset, that, through the National Economic Council as well as the governors into the mix. So you have a sector with a very diffuse leadership structure, and that's not bad if everyone decides to work together, because there's a benefit to specialization and the segregation of duties, because everyone can focus on what they do best. But if you're not talking to each other and engaging, you're going to have problems. And I think where we came into, in 2015 with this administration having to figure out many different things and challenges, coordination on the power sector began to suffer. So very simply, the Vice President, the Governor of Kaduna, who was representing the National Economic Council's Ad Hoc Committee on Power, the Power Minister, the Finance Minister, and I didn't mention, but finance is very involved in the power sector, given engagements with the World Bank and power purchase agreements MBET as well. Alongside the CBN, who've been providing a lot of funding to support the sector. They got together and they met with the president and said, we're tired of the lack of coordination. We'd like you to approve that we get together under a working group that's not meant to usurp the powers that were set up in the Act. It's not meant to take policy direction away from the ministry. It is just a talk shop and an advisory group for the president that allows everyone to get together and ensure that we're on the same page. And quite frankly, it's been very tremendous in helping us drive more consistent messaging for the government, more partnership and coordination. I'd say the objectives are very clear: improve coordination in the sector and drive the policy objectives of the administration, which is to make sure that this gap in the infrastructure between transmission, distribution, and generation is met. And then there's reliable power for the citizenry on grid, but most importantly, there's 18 million people or so off grid that, the MD is the biggest champion for, that we need to make sure we're not spending all of our collective energies just on 4,000 megawatts of on-grid problem, whereas we have 80 million people that are not even on the ladder for energy access that we need to focus on. So I think, those are the dual purposes of the working group. Ensure we can rectify the challenges on grid, but shine a light and support the off-grid sector very aggressively. And you can see some of the changes. The Economic Sustainability Committee document and approval from the president had nothing for the on-grid sector. It was just fully focused on driving off-grid technologies and off-grid energy access, which is a very big deal and is very closely linked to the president's agenda on taking 10 million people out of poverty every year for the next 10 years.
Great. Thanks so much. And you mentioned two critical points that I would want Anita to also speak on, which is funding and coordination. So, Anita, with the private developers as critical stakeholders in the business of energizing unserved and underserved communities across Nigeria, what types of funding, what types of funding opportunities do you have at the Nigerian Electrification Project, especially to private developers, towards pushing forth this business of energizing communities across the nation?
Thanks, David, for that question. So under or through the federal government of Nigeria, under the federal government of Nigeria, the Rural Electrification Agency has provided some funds through its Rural Electrification Fund, which was actually established by the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, as was the REA, and also the Nigeria Electrification Project. So first of all, talking about the Rural Electrification Fund, subsidies are provided to the private sector for the provision or the development of mini-grids around the country, as well as the deployment of the solar home systems as well. And under the Nigeria Electrification Project, which is funded by loan facilities provided by the World Bank and the African Development Bank, with a total of $550 million US, these funds provide subsidies to private sectors in order to also develop mini-grids and solar home systems. So essentially, funds are available for the private sector to scale up the off-grid power sector in Nigeria. And then also, under the federal government of Nigeria, you have the Bank of Industry, as well as Central Bank of Nigeria. You have the likes of NPSP, which is a program funded by the USAID towards helping private sector get access to these funds under the Bank of Industry and Central Bank of Nigeria in order to provide the much needed counterpart funding to the grant subsidies that we're providing under the Rural Electrification Fund and the Nigeria Electrification Project towards being able to develop these mini-grids and deploy these solar home systems. So you have those efforts under the federal government of Nigeria. And then on the private sector side, you have Olon, which is a major investor, has a tremendous pool of funds where they provide private sector with between $50,000 to $3 million per company to also participate in the business of mini-grids. And then you have commercial banks, for example, Sterling Bank, which has shown significant interest in the off-grid space, working very closely with the Rural Electrification Agency to also support private sector in providing the much-needed finance as well, to also add to the grant subsidies that federal government is providing to private sectors towards making, I guess, the mini-grid and solar home system business more attractive. And then you also have the likes of GIZ as well, who's been in this business for a long time and is responsible for developing a lot of the very first mini-grids as well in Nigeria. So there is a lot of support, financial support under the federal government of Nigeria as well as private sector, as just mentioned.
It seems like we have lost David. One of the things that Anita was mentioning earlier. But just speaking on from what Anita just said, you know, what becomes very clear is that there is a need for private sector investment. So most of what we do is to bring about, you know, programs that would encourage private sector to come in and also invest in the sector, you know, which I think some of the work that we're trying to do now with the agencies that Anita mentioned is primarily trying to do just that, to encourage private sector to come in and bring in their own money and get or make businesses out of off-grid solutions. So I think we have our moderator back. So David, I was just filling in for you while you were away.
Internet again. Thank you, Andy. Yes, and it's great that I think the newest baby is the Mokoloki project, the undergrid mini-grid by RMI. So James, give us a little bit of a breakdown on that project. How are you able to coordinate and manage multiple stakeholders towards achieving this very, very important feat?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll say a little bit about the project too for anyone that's not familiar with it. I will say at the outset, RMI has been involved, but I would not say that this is our baby necessarily. We were one of many parents on this, including REA and GIZ and others who have spent a lot of time and effort in creating the enabling environment necessary. The project, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is what we've called an undergrid mini-grid. So it's a collaboration between Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company, the community of Mokoloki in Ogun State, and Tropical Technologies, the developer, who signed a tripartite agreement to come into the community, which was, I think it's fair to say, was pretty well underserved by the distribution company. So they were grid interconnected, but received on the order of a few hours of power every few days. So it was pretty inconsistent and tended to be in the middle of the night. Yeah. And this was obviously a great opportunity to do something different. The community needed a better solution. They were using their gensets a lot, which was really expensive. The distribution company was losing money on every kilowatt hour that they sold. And, developers have been looking for ways to expand into some of these communities that are closer to urban centers and have a lot of existing economic activity that were previously off limits because of distribution company territory and the way that the regulation is set up. So all those parties came together to form a tripartite agreement to serve the community differently. In terms of the coordination to your question, David, and how we manage that, I think it really started from the very first conversations that we had with each of the different stakeholders involved, and started with really deeply understanding their individual needs and constraints and what their motivations were. So understanding what the distribution company wanted to see and what was going to make a project workable for them. Understanding what the community needed to see, what their kind of needs and constraints were in terms of what they could pay, what they were willing to pay, what types of, kind of additional things beyond just the provision of electricity they were interested in. From the developer side, again, and this comes back to the finance side, what were they able to finance? What were they not able to finance? What types of support did they need? What did they need contractually in order to satisfy their investors? And then facilitating that negotiation over a long period of time. Importantly, making sure that we were also coming in with the right level of folks in the room. I think that's been one of the challenges that we've seen in some other conversations that have happened, particularly with distribution companies, is, this is true in any organization of probably more than 10 people. You start to get a lot of silos, and it's easy to work within one silo and not necessarily have organization-wide support. So making sure that there was either a broad coalition within these larger organizations like the distribution companies. And I guess that comes back to your point earlier, Ahmad, around kind of the distribution of decision-making in the sector. So even the distribution of decision-making within individual organizations. I think the last thing I would say on this is, from a coordination perspective, making sure that we understood any potential barriers or roadblocks right at the start. With this particular project, the big ones that we saw were finance and regulatory hurdles, since this was a first of its kind test of the tripartite agreement that's laid out in the mini-grid regulation that NERC has on the books. And there were a lot of decisions that needed to get made that were not spelled out very explicitly in the regulation. It was sort of left open to the parties. So we wanted to get in front of that and engage NERC early on to bring them along in the process and get their opinions throughout, so that when it came time for them to approve the contract, they were pretty comfortable with what was being proposed. So a lot of elements to the coordination there, and that's just the high level.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, James, and congrats again on Mokoloki. If not for the pandemic, we have all been there, right, to witness the handover, but it's all good. It's good that it's active, and hopefully 6 months down the line, we'll be able to report a lot of wins, especially when it comes to the productive use by community members. So great job. So Ujunwa, you're going to tell us a little bit about Lagos today. So you know how a lot of entrepreneurs in Nigeria keep complaining that they can't really be at par with their counterparts across the world, because they have to deal with actually powering their businesses before they even ever think about scaling up. They are worried about powering their businesses, which I totally agree with, because energy is all you have to drive a lot of this entrepreneurial ideas. So for Lagos State, which is the hub for entrepreneurship in Nigeria, what sort of initiatives is the Lagos State government picking up, especially through your office, to aid the growth of entrepreneurship, as well as to power, to aid the growth of entrepreneurship on one hand, and then as well as to power underserved, hard-to-reach communities in Lagos State?
Thank you very much, David. I'll just provide a bit of context for those that don't really know so much about Lagos and those dialing in from other jurisdictions. So Lagos State is the fifth largest, has the fifth largest GDP in Africa. It's the largest city by population, over 22 million people. And in fact, in terms of population density, studies show that although Lagos State is just about 0.4% of Nigerian landmass, it's home to about 12% of the population. And then immigrants coming mainly, about 6,000, and about 2,000 of those don't even leave. So you can imagine that Lagos State is now estimated to be the largest city in the world in the next 100 years. And so really this makes the challenge and the work we need to do very huge, and it's critical that we put in the right resources and ecosystem to support the citizens. And so Lagos State today has the Lagos State Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, which is really tasked with ensuring that strategies to improve access to electricity and energy are ensured in the state, including policies and creating an enabling environment. And under the ministry, there are two major agencies. So the Lagos State Electricity Board, that is focused on ensuring it manages the 5 IPPs that supply Lagos State facilities and public facilities, as well as community electrification initiatives, and then managing public lighting. And then there's the Oil and Gas Corporation, which ensures energy security along the value chain. We're really focused on trying to deepen the use of cleaner fuels in the state. So in terms of specific initiatives, I'll just break it into 3. So the first is around planning and integrated resource planning for the state. And then the second is around specific community electrification initiatives, collaborating with the distribution companies, just as James mentioned. And the third is around metering, smart metering especially, which we know is a major challenge to citizens across the state. So in terms of integrated planning and ensuring that the resources required to ensure that the nations have reliable and accessible power in the next few years, Lagos State has been working with the USAID Power Africa Nigerian Power Sector Program, NPSP, to put together the integrated resource plan for Lagos State. The launch was done just about 2 weeks ago officially, but work actually started quite a while ago. And the ongoing study is looking at everything, so from load forecasting to demand side management, generation transmissions, distribution system planning, and just to ensure that at the end of the day, there's a clear plan for Lagos State, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. But while we're doing that, we're not waiting for the outcomes of that. We're still going ahead with other initiatives in the short term to ensure that we bridge the gap. As most of you know, Lagos State has 2 dedicated electricity distribution companies, the Ikeda and the Eco Disco, and it's also going to develop the largest, actually, GenCo in Nigeria, which is LB, the 1,320 megawatt plant. But Lagos State is unique in the sense that studies have shown that about 95%, the rate of electrification is about 95%, meaning the number of households connected to the grid. But this doesn't necessarily translate to reliable supply and assurance of getting electricity. So what Lagos State is doing currently is collaborating with the distribution companies to identify pilot zones for supply excellence. And we're first starting with the low-income areas because we know that once we get into those areas, private sector can come in to do even the more affluent areas. And so really what we're doing with those areas is looking at what is required in terms of upgrades, metering, and then potentially even the under the grid model mentioned by James, if we need additional generation at specific points. Although our assessment of the sector today shows that there's quite a bit of generation, albeit stranded generation. So we know that the last mile, so distribution, metering, is really where we can really make a big difference. And so we're working with GIZ to sort of assess those sites to see what is required in terms of community engagements, minimizing theft, and then enforcement. And then potentially, under the grid, potentially to supplement whatever supplies are there. And in terms of the third area I mentioned, which is in terms of metering, we know that metering is a major challenge in Nigeria. I mean, over 50% of the customers today in Nigeria are not metered, and same thing in Lagos State, at least 50% of the customers in Lagos are not metered. And this causes all sorts of issues. So there's no trust with the utilities, there's revenue leakages, and really, it just really doesn't help access to electricity. So what we're doing is supporting the already existing MAPS program while working with local manufacturers to ensure that we can come up with schemes to provide meters across Lagos. But something else we're doing is really trying to enhance local capacity building and then designing and producing a locally made meters. So Lagos State has launched the Lagos Smart Meter Hackathon. The call for applications actually started in March, but because of the pandemic, we had to really open, understanding the challenges. And so in the coming days, you will hear more about announcements in terms of a proper launch for the program and what to expect from people that have applied. So we've got an application for people that want to do the hardware, the software, and then we're working with the existing local manufacturers to actually produce. So we think that this is a win-win for everyone. So improved access to electricity, improved metering, but also our local skills are being used. So really in conclusion, we know that some of the existing federal government agencies are also doing a lot of work and we're collaborating as well. For instance, with the REA, looking at some of the health facilities in Lagos, the market, and potentially energizing agriculture. And while we're looking at the three major areas of planning, of pilot centers of excellence and nurturing, we know that collaboration is key to ensure that everything is successful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ujunwa. That was a very comprehensive highlight you've given. And I think it's very important because I'm sure the ND is excited about this sort of local initiatives you're also getting on the way, especially when it comes to actually developing these components. It just makes a lot of sense because a lot of youths in Nigeria, they could be very, very handy. I think a few months ago, the MD was drawing my attention to a tweet. MD, I don't know if you remembered, a certain individual who designed this generating set that is powered with water. So we see all these things on the web. So the idea is to be able to create an initiative that aggregates all these ideas so that for those who need funding as well, we could fund some of these things and then get them active and functional. It's really going to help the industry and help our costs towards driving energy access and closing the energy gap in Nigeria. Ahmad, are you still with us?
I'm here, yes. Okay.
I don't know if you'd love to share your thoughts about youth entrepreneurship, especially within the energy sector, within the renewable energy sector specifically. What do you think the federal government could do towards supporting agencies like the REA and other very critical agencies in harnessing the sort of ideas that Nigerian youths have towards developing critical components in the energy sector, like meters, just like Ujunwa mentioned, and other very valuable components that would aid the energy system and help in further developing this industry.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And actually, MD and I yesterday we had a good chat about the concept of entrepreneurship and empowerment and jobs. It's not something that's lost on the administration. The economic sustainability plan is underpinned by jobs, local production, and ensuring that it supports us to get out of the challenges that we're in, already with jobs, but even exacerbated with the COVID-19 pandemic. So when we think about it, 140 billion naira is targeted as loans to the private sector, either to do manufacturing or retail support for the off-grid sector. There's also a program that we're looking at for metering as well. Now, that doesn't fully answer the question because you talked about entrepreneurship and how we support self-starters. I think when you look at the industry, specifically off-grid, it's great because before we had it, there were jobs that did not exist. You know, many people in Kano, in Lagos, in Makurdi, you know, you find them now owning their own installation businesses, and some of them will go buy the equipment once they get a contract, and you know they'll come put your 3 kilowatt system on the roof, you know, or they're employed by Loomis and others to do installations as contractors. That has created many jobs. And we think that us working through the Economic Sustainability Committee plan in partnership with REA as the implementation agency, we were very focused on saying that loans should go to the retail segment. Because when you're supplying loans to the retail segment of the value chain, that is the loans that smaller and medium enterprises can access. When you talk manufacturing, it's the big players. REMD had also told me about the great plans through REF to have an entrepreneurship fund. That's something that the administration supports greatly, and we're looking at ways to enhance financing there. But I would say we need to think about the empowerment and the entrepreneurship in 3 ways. One is around research and development and new initiatives and projects. Organizations like the NASEMI, are involved in that front end work, and I know they have good relationships and partnerships with the REA as well as other players in the power sector. Second group is really, how can we create jobs and improvements and innovation in manufacturing? That's a big scale game, and we're looking at getting a number of key players in that can, underpin that market. And then thirdly, we really think about the retail and smaller and medium enterprises. And the World Bank, the central bank facility, as well as the World Bank facility through NEP, really focuses on that segment of the value chain. But I will tell you, there's a lot of Nigerian ingenuity. We need to support that ingenuity. You'd be surprised, somebody gets 50 million naira, 100 million naira off of a great idea, and you can see how big and how many jobs that can be created through just supporting them. So we need to seek those people out, we need to listen to them, and we need to provide funding to really support and catalyze their ideas into becoming reality. But I'm very excited to have found out that there's something under REF. I'm working vigorously with MD and EDREF as well to see where we can grab more money to enhance that great program that the REA came up with, and we'll continue to work on the other initiatives through the Economic Sustainability Committee and other initiatives in the government.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Honorable Ahmad. It's great to know that there's a lot that's going to keep happening even as we move forward, and I'm sure in the next couple of months, a lot of these ideas would start seeing the results and the impact. So Anita, I don't know, I would like you to, continue to amplify the great work being done at NEP, at the Nigeria Electrification Project, continuously on all our channels periodically. It's a strategically designed project to accelerate energy access through SHS and mini grids. Could you tell us how these two components, the SHS on the one hand and the mini grid on the other, can you take us through how these two components are different especially as it relates to closing the energy gap, and of course the general expected impact to the community?
Thank you for that question, David. Just to provide some context, before REA sort of embarked on, promoting mini-grid development and solar home systems, in collaboration with McKinsey, we developed a document with regards to promoting universal electrification in Nigeria. And during our findings, we found that in order to achieve universal electrification in Nigeria within a short time frame and at least cost, there would be need to supplement the grid with off-grid solutions such as mini-grids and solar home systems. You'd notice I mentioned supplement and not take over the grid. So the idea is that for those communities that are far from the grids, 10 kilometers or so far from the grid, that are densely populated with some economic activity, agricultural activities, and so on. We are of the opinion that putting in mini grids would be very viable because of the low demand there. And then we also feel that the solar home systems, in reaching those very remote communities that are sparsely populated with minimal economic activity, therefore probably a very low demand for energy, the most suitable solution would be a solar home system, which, as you know, comprises of your PV panel on your rooftop, which could probably charge 2 lighting points, a fan, and depending on how much money you have, put in a small TV. But the idea is that if you truly want to achieve universal electrification within a short time, and at the least cost, it's important to sort of identify those locations and determine what the best solution is, the most cost-effective solution is for those locations. So that's essentially, the reason why we've embarked upon promoting these off-grid solutions. And at the same time, as we recognize that the target beneficiaries are somewhat at the bottom of the pyramid as it concerns, access to finance. In order to make this sort of business solar home system and mini-grid businesses attractive or viable, it's important for federal government to step in and provide the much-needed subsidies in order to reduce the end cost the cost to the end users, and thereby make these projects more viable for the private sector. So. That's essentially the idea behind mini-grids and solar home systems.
Great. James, do you want to add a little bit to that, especially as it relates to, and that reminds me, I think we could hear a bit from you concerning the sustainability plan for Okoleki. What components should a Surefire sustainability plan contain? As far as energizing rural communities go, I know it's very, very important to also take note of that, so that it goes beyond setting up these systems and powering these communities, but how airtight are the sustainability plans? So could you share a bit of that?
That's a great question, David, and I think connects directly to what Anita just said, and it really comes back to selecting the right solution for a given situation in a given community. I would say that there's several elements to what you might call a sustainability plan. There's certainly the economic sustainability. So to each stakeholder involved, thinking about it from the community perspective, is this solution going to be something that's cost effective for them both today? Are they going to save money compared to the existing gen sets they're using, if they are using gen sets? But also 10 years from now, 15 years from now, because these are long-lived projects. And so making sure that this is something that isn't kind of a flash in the pan solution that is going to work for a couple of years, but down the road, they're going to regret. And there's always some amount of that risk with kind of first movers with new technologies, as costs are relatively high, but once the industry scales, they'll come down. So that is something that we'll have to figure out in a few years as an industry. also economic sustainability from the developer or financier standpoint. So again, is this something that they're going to be able to earn, a return on and ultimately earn a payback on their investment, which is important for the developer, also important for financiers, and ensuring that, if every project is able to do that, it will contribute to de-risking the sector as a whole and leading in more investment. There's also the technical side. So from a technical sustainability standpoint and a resilience standpoint, is the system one that is going to last for a couple of years and then fall into disrepair and need upgrades that they can't afford, like replacing batteries? Or is it something that's going to last for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? There's the environmental sustainability component as well, which, I think is certainly a key aspect of this from a national and an international perspective, but also at a local level. I think we've all been in communities where, people are running diesel gensets right next to their door in their home, breathing in those fumes. Fuel is messy, gets spilled inevitably, and there's a lot of those kind of local environmental components. Lastly, I'd say this is maybe more of a slightly more macroeconomic sustainability standpoint, but ensuring that there's a connection to economic development. So it's not just providing power, but it's also enabling productive use of electricity, connecting those other initiatives, and this is something that the REA has done a great job of, making sure that we're thinking about what are the ways to pull in things like appliance financing to support entrepreneurs in the community to use the electricity more productively and kick off that virtuous cycle over time. So those are a few of the things that we've thought about more generally. I think in the Mocha Loki project specifically, we've really thought through the economic side in detail at the outset, because it was a new project and nobody was going to do it if it didn't make economic sense over the long term and there was too much risk. So we tried to make that case as bulletproof as possible. Similarly, the technical solution, I think, is pretty tried and true. And this component of tying in economic development is one that I think as a sector we're all still trying to figure out exactly what the right model is that'll work. So there are a few things that the developer is testing there.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. MD, sir, I think we should get back to you on Ujun a while ago spoke about what the Lagos State government is doing, how important it is, especially when it comes to powering entrepreneurs on the South communities. As the MD of REA, what sort of systems or initiatives or ideas do you have when it comes to continuous collaboration with state governments across the country?
Thank you very much, David. And I think what continues to excite me within this particular space is the commitment from stakeholders in the common cause for universal access in private sector participation, and how DFIs like the Rockefeller Foundation and the RMI working very hard in coming up with innovative solutions like they've just done in the Mokolobi project, just as it has been concluded now. So what Ojuma talked about in terms of what the state governments are doing. So what has just become very clear and obvious is that the government on its own, that's the federal government, is not just in a position to tackle the electrification we have in the country. Ahmad Zakari mentioned earlier, we are talking north of 80 million people without access to electricity, and with some of the challenges that we are currently facing with the on-grid space and even the economic sustainability plan, is more or less emphasizing on how or what we can achieve in the off-grid space from looking at improving upon the manufacturing side of things, because what you realize now is that the industries up heavy on importation of solar home systems, but with the economic sustainability program, we are able to build on the local manufacturing aspect. And also, it shows you that, there's a great potential in coming together and having partnerships. Even the Sustainable Development Goals has emphasized the need for partnerships. So one of the things that I was quickly able to do when I resumed as the MD of REA is to form a donor coordination group, within my office, so we have a dedicated desk that is bringing together efforts from various donor organizations, and in partnership with the NPSP program, we're able to, and Olon, of course, we're able to have, various roundtable discussions, and we look to do that, recurrently every quarter, where the REA is mapping out various aspects of the value chain that it's currently wanting to interface on, especially with the conclusion of my 5-year plan for my time in office, at least for now, to see how other agencies can come in and add from the project development aspect up to implementation. So this is something that is ongoing, and it just shows that it's very, very important to continue those kind of collaborations. Then secondly as well, under the NEP program, we have support for intergovernmental collaborations, and it's headed by a very experienced officer. I don't know if I think my internet is being a bit unstable, but I don't know if you can all hear me. So that as well is a platform that we're currently building, see how we can continue to work with state governments. So we've opened up conversations with various state governments, and as Ojumo mentioned, we look at the strategic areas where that particular state government is looking to intervening. Then within the resources we have in the REA, both from a technical and financial side, we come together and put together a very small team that will work with them in supporting them deliver some of those projects. And that form of support can also come as a facilitation. So we are assisting in areas where we have seen that there is a gap and there is a developer that is trying to get into that space. So we come in and facilitate those conversations. And I mean that framework has currently been designed, and we're using it to engage a few state governments. Also mentioned earlier, we are also deliberately putting in some of programs with the REF fund, for instance. So with the entrepreneurship and innovation, and also with the state governments, we will put together some funding around that, to see how we can continue to use that to encourage state governments, because at the end of the day, to be able to sustain these projects, you need to have full ownership of especially the state governments, and we want to use them to be able to develop that particular framework that would be able to ensure that the projects that we have, are very, very sustainable. I mean, with what James has done as well, with what they have sort of come together to do with the support of the REA, for the tripartite arrangement, I think it's a good opportunity for us to build upon that. We had a similar arrangement here in Abuja with the Wuse market, but it just shows you how far we can go. Because even through the Rural Electrification project, we recently delivered about 135 kilowatt peak systems in 2 communities in Bayelsa, and that came through the performance-based grant. So the emphasis continues to be on partnerships, and partnerships that will span from the federal, state, and local government, then go into private sector developers and also international development agencies. I think if we can put our heads together, we would have a chance of reaching the underserved and unserved areas in Nigeria. I don't know, David, it seems you're on mute.
Yes, thank you so much, MD. Thank you so much, MD. I mean, the REA can only do so much, especially as it relates to collaborating with state governments. Now, I'd love to ask Ujunwa, for example, Lagos State, let's use Lagos State as a case now. Are there any steps you're taking to ensure that there's an enabling regulatory environment, I mean, to promote this sort of investments in the energy sector in Lagos?
So thanks, David. We very strongly believe that the suitable regulatory framework and environment is key to achieve access to energy for all and electricity in particular. And so this is really an area that we're focusing on very strongly. As already mentioned by Honorable Ahmad, the EPSRA 2005 was really the blueprint for the sector, the guiding framework for everything that is being done today. And we keep transitioning and building on what was done there. But we know that it's not enough to stop there, and then additional policies and regulations are required to build on that, as well as incentives as may be required. We also know that there's a lot of gaps, especially in terms of investment in the last mile. So coming very close to the customers. So how do we get the last mile connected, and how do we ensure they get the right infrastructure, which could be either the grid extension, which could be mini-grids as has been mentioned, or whether it's infrastructure like metering. So we know that it's very important to have the right regulatory framework. And we've seen that some policies have worked very, very well, like the mini-grid policy. We see that today we have quite a number of mini-grid players and even existing mini-grids. And the policy gave confidence to investors to come and invest in that sector. And then recently, we also see that the guideline on distribution franchising is playing a role to help to encourage investments in the distribution sector, and then collaboration between other stakeholders, whether it's mini-grid developers or whoever it is, to come and work within distribution areas and say, okay, I take this community and I help this community to work properly, whatever is required, so whether it's infrastructure upgrades, whether it's new generation capacity, whether it's whatever it is really that is required, building on policies or guidelines that exist today. But specifically as a state, in 2018, the state issued the Rural State Electric Power Sector Reform Law, which was really essentially to build electricity supply through the establishment of embedded power schemes and then creation of offenses for like energy theft and things like that. At the time, the thought was really around embedded generation, which would essentially be providing power directly to the distribution companies. But with the broader understanding we have of where the sector is going in general and what the potential is in the sector, we know that what is required is even beyond additional generation. There's a lot of stranded capacity. We know that we need to be considering how we provide renewable energy and energy efficiency incentives where applicable. We also know that there are new models coming up today, ranging from, as I mentioned, distribution franchising to the undergrid models and things like that. So what we're doing now is reviewing that law to see how it can serve the current industry the way we see it, and what the needs of the industry is in terms of drawing additional investment. And so last month in June, we called for inputs and papers on the current regulation, but beyond that, on what the state needed to do in order to ensure it's an enabling environment for access to electricity and to attract investors or developers. What do we need to see? And we got tremendous responses, and when we closed that at the beginning of this month, and ranging from the full range of whether it's renewable, whether it's energy efficiency, whether it's improving the system of ensuring that energy theft is reduced and things like that, and ensuring that local capacity is enhanced. So really, we are hoping that in the next few weeks, we are going to have a stakeholder engagement session where we invite all of the stakeholders here as well as the entire industry to share their input based on what they submitted, and then ultimately ensure that this government is able to deliver reliable access to energy or to all in Lagos. But I think what is very important is to understand the need for synergies among the various organizations or the various entities, especially the states, that are assisting in one way or the other to ensure that, for instance, if a new business is coming to set up, what do you need to do, especially an energy business? Can you just go straight to the ministry to do all of the registrations that we need? So having that in mind, we know that it's important to ensure that the regulation promotes investment and that Lagos State continues to create an enabling environment through periodic reviews of the laws or any policies existing.
Thank you so much, Ujunwa. I'm very glad that you were able to take us through that quickly as well. And I agree with you, such synergies are actually very, very important, both within and across board. Anita, I'll love you to speak a little bit about the EEP initiative, the Energizing Education program of the NEP. How important is this initiative to education, especially education and healthcare?
Thank you, David. As you know, the education and healthcare sectors are most important in order to drive socio-economic development or growth in the country, right? So in order to make these sectors sort of thrive and work at optimum capacity, it's important to ensure that we have conducive environments for those sectors. So as a result, the Energizing Education Program provides reliable, affordable, and clean power supply to federal universities and teaching hospitals in order to meet this objective. The program's being implemented in phases. Actually, phase one is fully funded by the federal government of Nigeria and targets 9 universities and 1 teaching hospital. If you permit me, I would love to show some pictures with regards to the status of implementation. And then phase 2 and phase 3 are targeted at 7 universities. So phase 2, 7 universities, 2 teaching hospitals, and phase 3, 8 universities. And these 2 phases are actually funded under the Rural Electrification Project. So by the loan facilities I spoke about earlier, by the World Bank or from the World Bank and the African Development Bank. So I'm not sure if I'll get the opportunity to share my screen and just show some of these pictures. The fantastic captive power plants ranging from between 1 to 8 megawatts, and essentially it's like the largest of its kind solar hybrid power plant in Nigeria. Unfortunately, I don't think we've been able to sort of get it out there to the public to see what the federal government of Nigeria is doing through the Rural Electrification Agency to ensure that our very important sectors are being sort of assisted in this regard.
Good. Would you like to share that with us just for 2 minutes?
Great.
Yeah, I've given you, I've authorized you to share your screen.
Thank you.
So I think you can actually share it directly from there. Yeah. Okay, great.
Great. So here's a 7.1 megawatt solar hybrid power plant that was commissioned last year, September, by His Excellency. This is in Bayero University in Kano. Then you have another solar hybrid power plant, 2.8 megawatts in Untitled University in Ebonyi State, which, like the BUK project, has been in operations and maintenance for almost 1 year now without any issues, thank God. And then we have this project recently completed in University of Petroleum Resources in Delta, which is just over 1 megawatt, total installed capacity, that is. And then we have, again, just over 1 megawatt in ATBU in Bauchi State, which was completed sometime in January. And although it hasn't been officially commissioned, just technically commissioned, it has been providing power actually to the university, reliable power since January. Then we have the largest solar hybrid power plant, which our MD of REA shall be commissioning soon, probably via virtual commissioning as a result of this COVID-19. And this is just over 8 megawatts of total installed capacity in University of Agriculture, Makurdi, Benue.
Virtual commission these days.
Yes, they do. It's very important so that they can see what the federal government of Nigeria is actually doing, under this administration for our federal institutions. So it's quite important we get this message out through the Rural Electrification Agency. So here we have Nnamdi Azikiwe University on my left-hand side, and on my right-hand side, the plant we've also completed in Usmanu Danfodio University in Sokoto. Yeah, so I'll leave it there.
And Ahmad,
So this is just to give some examples of, what we've done under the Energizing Education Program, and there are more universities, more teaching hospitals to benefit under this program from the phase 2, phase 3, and subsequent phases, should we be able to secure further funding sources. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Anita. And I think, Ahmad, I was just going to mention, we took a cue from the President, His Excellency, and the Vice President. They seem to do these virtual commissionings. So we thought to ourselves, why can't we do the same thing? So
Exactly. There's COVID in the land. Just set up a virtual commission and get it done. Because if not, the thing will pile up so much that we won't be commissioning every week next year as things settle down.
and also use that opportunity to save costs, because
Yes.
if you should do the commissionings live, you can imagine the number of dignitaries that need to attend. Some you probably have to accommodate. So this is a good opportunity for us to do these commissioners virtually, and I think we've already set up few committees that are currently making the arrangements for us to be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you so much, Anita. And I'm already seeing a lot of comments here. They need your slides, Anita. They need to have your slides. So, so I might have to do a lot of emailing back and forth. Okay, I can see a few people sending me their emails here. So, after this chat, I would forward it to them. And also share. We share on our Facebook platform, on our social media platform generally. So we are slowly rounding up. Well, we spend a lot of time. We have like 15 minutes to round up. So I would love to use this time left very strategically. So I would because there will be a Q&A. But as a final question to all the panelists, and that's the last word, generally, can COVID-19 accelerate, this pandemic, the fact that we were so hopeful about 2020, but 2020 actually kicked off with a pandemic, and the pandemic is actually eating deep into the time we have to do a lot of things. Can the COVID-19 pandemic accelerate funding for access to electricity? MD, I would love to start with you on that. This is a general question. Can the COVID-19 pandemic accelerate funding for access to electricity in Nigeria and in Africa?
Yes, certainly. And as to Ahmad's point earlier, out of a very bad situation, you can actually find positives in it. So, for instance, in the Nigerian space, what you find is that the pandemic on its own has further drawn attention of government into the efforts that is needed to continue to improve our facilities, including healthcare facilities. So I think what you find is that as part of the economic sustainability plan, a lot of resources would be made available, not just to the healthcare facilities, but of course to other activities, that would stimulate the economy. So, we expect that there is more money allocated to rural roads, more money allocated to some roads as well, and also, the health sector, and other areas that need this sort of intervention around this particular period. So with that being said, I think yes, it is not a good situation, but I think government is using this opportunity to put in some money to be able to improve some of these facilities that are either directly involved with the COVID intervention, or are indirectly involved with, improving people's lives to be able to live within the pandemic.
Yes. Ahmad, can we hear your take on?
Yeah, briefly, look, I said it in the beginning, there's a certain focus that comes from adverse situations, and you can see the country moving away from these regressive subsidies like the fuel subsidy that we've always said benefits the rich at the expense of the poor. We're working very rigorously now to restructure the power subsidy as well, so we can free up more resources for off-grid and subsidies for the poor people on-grid. I don't understand, and I've been very vocal within government around why should someone in Maitama or Sokoro or Victoria Island or Lekki be paying a smaller cost per kilowatt hour than someone in Rokota. I don't understand it, right? It's something that we need to really get away from. But I think this, financial challenges have focused everyone's mind, and we're trying to get to do the right thing. So, the focus that we're trying to drive within the administration is, use your money to focus on subsidizing people that need subsidy. Those that don't, let them pay, and, focus funding on infrastructure, off-grid and on-grid to integrate the value chain problems that we have. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to see very great outcomes over the next 3 years. The REA is on a roll. We want to see many people get electrified. We're targeting at least 30 to 40 million Nigerians getting electrified, especially with this boost from the ESC plan that is being designed by the MD and the team. Furthermore, we're going to work to see if we can get these significant value chain problems we've had on grid out of the way as well. So I'm optimistic about the future, and I believe we'll put more funding in the space.
Thank you, Honorable. James?
Yeah, maybe to add an international perspective, I think one of the things that there's a very clear recognition from a lot of governments, a lot of international funding agencies, is that some amount of stimulus or recovery money is going to be needed, and that's certainly going to be true in everyone's home countries. But there's also a recognition that international aid will be a priority as well. So I think to the extent that a lot of these projects and the work that REA and the government of Nigeria is doing in the power sector are really foundational to a lot of what international funders are looking to support, there should be additional money that comes in to Nigeria, to other countries in sub-Saharan Africa through these international recovery packages. So exactly what that looks like, I think we're still a ways away from knowing, and a lot of governments are still trying to get their house in order at home. And, I can say in the U.S. we're still very much in the throes of the pandemic, so things are uncertain, but probably in the next 6 to 12 months, I would imagine we'll see some more clarity there.
Thank you so much. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's clear, even internationally, that a significant amount of funding is required for access to electricity, especially in Africa, at least 120 billion annually over the next 20 years. And we've also seen, at least globally, in terms of investments in renewables, that even with the pandemic, the level of investment as at H1 2020 was actually higher than what it was, about 5% higher than what it was in H1 2019. So it's clear that COVID-19 has shown an urgent need for funding of healthcare, for electricity for healthcare, amongst other things. And I think even locally in Lagos, we were clearly focusing on expanding some of the existing clean energy solutions. So whether it's the 213 solar installations across schools and hospitals, as well as ensuring that new solutions like wind energy is being promoted now with private sector and then donors, as well as ensuring energy efficiency for lighting and things like that. But I know that two things will be required in order to get this funding that's required clearly. And one would be to ensure that especially our local developers are funding ready. So they are set, they have their business plans, financial models, they have a clear business model, and they have all the support they need. This support comes in terms of project preparation, as well as some equity project development funding. In terms of project development, we have PFAM and the Get Invest COVID-19 window. They help with project preparation. I think that's very important, especially for local developers. And then equity, I know the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, the AIDB, recently launched a $760,000 fund for small-scale renewables. But the second thing I think is important is then speeding up the deployment of already pledged funding. So there's a funding for the sector that just hasn't gotten into projects. And I think things that might help would be standardization. So investment documents for specific projects. So for instance, for mini grids, for wind energy projects, now for under the grid models, if we have standardized documents, I think it will help very, very well to just speed up the process. And if institutions like donors and even coordinated by the REA, I think that would be a very useful initiative. And then from the donor perspective or the investor, if they can then be nimble given the situation and then sort of speed up some of their program processes, if it was usually done quarterly, consider it monthly, and then bundle packages, just like the AIDB and the World Bank has done for the REA. So it's a bundle program, so you don't have to keep going back for approvals. I think that has shown that that is a scheme that works. So really, I think it's really left for us to support the local companies and then speed up the funding that is already pledged. Thanks.
Great. Anita.
Okay, so as not to be so repetitive, I essentially align with what everyone has mentioned. But I guess in addition, just to explain the efforts of the Rural Electrification Agency towards sort of supporting these private sector developers during these hard times, we have embarked upon trying to provide advance payments under a Nigeria electrification project. Hasn't been concluded yet, but as you know, under the as you may know, under the Nigeria electrification project, we have components that are essentially performance-based. So we tend to provide funding to private sector companies upon connections being verified from mini grids that are being developed and solar home systems being installed, and so on. However, we understand that business is slowing down as a result, and there's need for liquidity in order to ensure that, I guess, these companies are kept afloat. So it's an area that we're currently in discussions with all the key stakeholders to see whether it's possible to provide some sort of advance payment, whilst at the same time ensuring that these companies do actually deliver and we don't have any incomplete projects as we've had in the past in our country.
Great. Thank you so much, Anita. And also, I want to appreciate you, Anita, and other panelists. I can see you're already giving responses to some of these questions coming in. I can see a few here from James, a few from Anita. Okay, I have one here, which I should probably throw out there. So this one says, just like the efforts being made by the government on COVID-19 isolation centers, are there any power intervention plans targeted at troubled zones, such as the IDP camps in the Northeast? Honorable Ahmad, I think this one is directed to you. So it says, just like the efforts being made by the government on COVID-19.
I'm not aware. I think REA can answer if there's any specific REA initiatives, but the whole country is in a problem now, and there wasn't a specific fund only for the Northeast. The economic sustainability plan is for everywhere, but I do know some donors have more of a specific focus on the Northeast, and also obviously, this administration set up the Northeast Development Commission to get targeted funds, and I know NEDC is looking at how to support, challenges specifically in the IDP camps and whatnot. But I'm not sure if REA specifically may have some programs focused on that. Perhaps the team can speak to that.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that question. So as Ahmad mentioned, as part of the economic sustainability plan, obviously what the REA would do is to put forward, based on data that we have, areas that the REA has studied and looked at as the most vulnerable areas, which I think the Northeast would fall into. And I'm happy to say that we also have developers who, as you wouldn't expect, are actually very, very comfortable with participating within the Northeast. So the security challenges, some of the security challenges we have, doesn't actually deter any developers from going there. And I'm proud to say that we've also opened up a dialogue with a few of the states within the Northeast, at the highest level, just to see what kind of support that they can provide for the REA and other developers that are looking to go there. So there isn't one particular program that would be sort of taken directly to the Northeast. However, given the peculiarity and the situation that we have there, naturally, these funds would find their way to the Northeast. And if we deliberately also work with developers that are comfortable with going there, what you find is that we are able to take some development there. So I don't have the exact projects now, but I know even within the grid extension programs that we do under the capital budget, projects have been taken to the Northeast, especially around Dolmoyo Bay, Adamawa, Taraba, and also, I know the Northeast states are also part of the minimum subsidy tender, which the NEP is currently running, and also within the REF Call 1, you have areas in the Northeast that have been benefiting from that, and also in the in the REF Call 2, we would have programs that are going to reach there. So overall, the Northeast, I think, is adequately going to be catered for.
Just also add to what the MD had mentioned, under the Energizing Education Program Phase 2, actually University of Maiduguri is also going to be a beneficiary. And then under the performance-based grant subcomponent, of the mini-grid components of Nigeria electrification project, we literally allow mini-grid developers to come to us and say, look, I found this community, I'd like to provide a mini-grid in this particular community to supply power. And, we don't restrict them. So companies, developers, whoever's ready to go into Maiduguri and other northeastern states, we're very happy to provide them the much needed support via our subsidies under NEP for them to do so.
Okay, great. Thanks so much to all the panelists. Thanks so much, MD REA. Thank you, Jane. I know it's an off time over there, Jane. You have to wake up for this, right? Thank you so much, Ujunwa.
I did think about that. James is probably not, it's around 6 a.m. or so.
It was a little early, but I've got a cup of coffee, so I've done it. The sun is up now, so I get an early start to my Saturday.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Anita. Thanks, everyone. This brings us to the end of this session. For everyone, for all the attendees joining in, I thank you so much. I can see your comments to learn more about the REA, you can visit www.rea.gov.ng. That's www.rea.gov.ng. And of course, we have super active social channels on Twitter, Facebook, and of course, LinkedIn. And if you are a video addict, you could join us on YouTube to watch some of our projects. But generally, you could continue to follow us on our social channels. And to keep this thing going, the hashtag is the REA Power Chat. That's one word. That's the REA Power Chat. Hashtag the REA Power Chat. So you can chat us up on Twitter so that we can get this conversation going till we have the next episode of the REA Power Chat. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David. Great job.
Yeah, could you commend you for moderating and putting this together? Well done. And thank you very much, other panelists and attendees that were also.
Thank you, MD.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, James. Bye.
James, we'll talk later. Bye.
Sounds good.
Yeah.